definitely a good brother in the Lord, and that is our brother Andy. Andy, how are you today?
I'm okay, thank you. It's not day here anymore. In
That's
fact,
right.
I'm already in tomorrow by Israeli reckoning, because of course
That's
there's
evening.
evening and then there's morning and then
That's
so I'm
that's right.
actually ahead of you guys by a whole day.
Amen. Well, Andy,
But
thank you for
wait a
joining
minute,
us.
just something's come up here. It says the account owner can also watch this.
Yeah,
Okay,
just
okay,
hit okay.
just got
Yeah.
it. Okay, that's fine. That's okay.
We just want to make sure that we won't turn our records over to the FBI. So that
All
was
right.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also agree. No, thank you for joining us. And of course, Andy is from Memorial, Israel, and he's in Israel today and undisclosed location. But nonetheless, he's here with us. And thank you so much, Andy, for being with us, taking the time. I
It's
know it's evening
okay.
for you. I know it's evening for you and really late, but I really appreciate you being here with us.
Okay, well, thank you for having me anyway.
Yeah.
You know,
So we'll go through the details in
yeah.
terms of how do people find out more about you and your ministry there. But I also want to introduce Jay. Jay, how are you, brother?
I'm good, Marco. Good to be here. Good
Always,
to see everybody.
amen. Well, always good to have you here, brother. And of course, down under, it is already Saturday. Davey, how are you, Davey?
Doing pretty good. Doing pretty good. Thanks.
All right. Well, though we missed Jacob, he's in Scotland, and David is not available today, but we're here. We're here, and we're glad that you joined us, and we're glad that you are watching and paying attention to what the Lord is showing us, not only in Scripture but also what He's doing in the world. Andy, real quick before we get started and have more information about your ministry, how do people get in touch with you after the podcast? A lot of people ask our guests, "Hey, I like what he said. I like what they do. How do we get in touch with them?" So,
Um,
the best way to
well,
find something about your work.
you can email me on the on my details are on the Moriel website. I mean, I'm one of my functions is I'm the kind of admin guy over here. That's one of them anyway, and kind of go for this and go for that. Um, and I do I do stuff.
Yeah, good stuff. By the way, did you
and
still you're still writing? You're still writing articles.
Yes, of course. Yeah, yeah. I've got some stuff in the pipeline I want to put out. I've just been recently going very deep into Second Thessalonians because I want to respond to some nonsense put out by
All right, very
someone over
good.
here.
So
But
make sure you guys go to
yeah,
Moriel.org and under the banner of Israel, Moriel Israel, there's his information if you want to get a hold of him. And also his YouTube channel, Doctrine Matters on YouTube.
yes,
And make sure you go to Doctrine
yeah,
Matters. There is another channel called The Doctrine Matters Podcast. That's not the one. I think that's by Spencer Smith or something like that.
yeah.
But Doctrine Matters, and I think it's Doctrine Matters 5396. Doctrine Matters
Yes.
55396, and that you'll find Andy's work there, his
Oh,
prolific work of videos, right?
no, not so many yet, but I'm hoping to proliferate it more. I need to make them shorter, though. I mean, I get over what's the word? I like to explain everything down to the very anticipate objections, so it turns from a 15-minute movie into a 2-hour one.
Well, I have no idea what that is like, so I'm just going to move on. No, I'm just kidding. We have
Anyway,
that's been one of my problems is our videos tend to be a little longer. We need
yeah,
to be more succinct in videos. I get your pain, brother. I do get your pain, and we're
yeah.
working every day to be better and more effective in our conversations, especially when speaking of doctrine and speaking of things that are very important, theology and the things of the Lord. We need to be clear,
Yeah.
succinct, and of course, we want to get that information out to as many people. So I'll be glad if people go to your channel. Be glad if people go to your contact you if they have any further questions, especially after spending some time with you in Israel. Davey and I were in Israel with you, traveling along and meandering through the Sea of Galilee, and that was a lot of fun. So hopefully we can
Yes,
do it
it
again.
was. It was a good time of fellowship, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think I just drove you so tired. I don't think you ever wanted to see us again.
Well, I was exhausted for about a week afterwards. Actually, I
Yeah,
wasn't quite
yeah.
myself.
Well, but since you took my call after that, then I figured you weren't too upset. So that was good. No, amen, amen. Well, before we get started, we have podcasts. So not only are we on video, but we're also on audio. Maybe we get some of Elon's stuff on audio soon. The podcast schedule is coming out, and Jay's got it. So Jay, why don't you let us know?
All right. So coming up this week, on 6/17, we have the Weekend Bible Study with Jacob Prash. Don't even pray for these people. On 6/18, we have the Sunday morning by Pastor Marco, the book of Colossians, God's Plan versus Man's Teaching, Part 1. On 6/19, this episode of Catching Up with Jacob will drop. 6/20, we have Apologetics by Sandy Simpson, Pre- and Post-Millennial Doctrines, Do Not Mix, and Fallacious Arguments of the Neo-Universalist, episode 134.
Whoa.
That was a mouthful. On 6/21, we have another episode of Ken's Corner. I cannot vouch for that number, but it's a new episode. 6/22, we have Jacob's Midweek Bible Study, The Trees of Righteousness, Part 2. And on 6/23, Friday with Jacob, Understanding the Rapture. Moriel's podcast can be found on moriel.org, Moriel TV, Buzzsprouts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Podcast Index, Amazon Music, TuneIn, and Alexa, iHeartRadio, and Player FM, and many, many others.
Man,
Good grief.
it just keeps growing. I
Yeah,
couldn't
it
even
does.
keep up with it anymore. And I tell Jacob he's about as popular as Joe Rogan now on podcasts. He's everywhere, and I think he's better than Joe Rogan. But anyway, there's a lot more, and there's probably scratched the surface in terms of episodes and new episodes. And hopefully, we have some of the stuff that I've been encouraging Andy to come on, and I'm glad he did today. But also encouraging to make videos and to let the word out through podcasts and audio what's going on in Israel, because it's so important, so important. And so we welcome those who are watching live and those who are watching later. But if you're live today on Facebook and YouTube, just remember, we're going to go to backstage to talk about a very, very explosive topic, which is the war on children. And it's going to be quite interesting what's going on in Israel, as well as the United States, as well as the rest of the world, really. But we're not going to be able to do it on Facebook and YouTube. So jump over to moriel.tv, morieltv.org, our Rumble channel that keeps growing. And of course, Vimeo, we're there on Vimeo, we're there on Telegram. Am I missing one? I think I'm missing one, but I forget which one it is. But if you are on YouTube and Facebook, just know that for the first part, which is Catching Up with Jacob, we are going to be on there. But for the backstage, you need to go into the other platforms. And if you want to ask questions for Andy, he has really agreed to take questions. Make sure you go on Rumble and type it in through the chat. And he's already getting nervous, but nonetheless, please keep the questions to the topics that we have today. I know we amplify a lot of questions sometimes, and we have a broad spectrum of questions, but today we want to really specify, because of the sake of time, the questions regarding the topics that we are dealing with today. And you're going to be very fascinated with some of the topics and what's going on in Israel. So with all that said, let's get started. Andy, you're good?
Well, I hope so.
All right, let's do it. Now, we're not going to talk about the indictment of Trump, although there's a very titillating subject, and we'll probably leave that for another time, maybe when Jacob comes back. We're not going to talk about why the mainstream media doesn't want to talk about the fact that Joe Biden made like $20 to $30 million of illicit payments to the Biden crime family, I guess. And what the White House is saying, these are for books, speaking engagement, all kinds of stuff, which you buy that, Andy? $20-30 million for speaking engagements.
Yeah, that sounds so ridiculous, doesn't it? When he can't actually form a sentence at all. So
yeah, maybe it was for $1 million per letter or something like that. But anyway, why is New York introducing vending machines to get crack pipes and to get addicts some crack pipes? I don't know, but we'll find out later. What has the U.S. government been stockpiling dirt on American citizens? That's an interesting one, isn't it? Purchasing data brokers. So let's say the government doesn't want to spy on you. They just want to say, well, we're not really spying on you, but they'll get the information from third parties, the tech world, the social media world, right? It's a nightmare scenario, and data brokers are a dime a dozen now. And the United States have been amassing large of information, of sensitive information, perhaps to use it against U.S. citizens. That's to be debatable, but I wouldn't put it past them the way they've been acting. I think this was the one Andy told me about. We're not going to talk about how Amazon locked out a man out of his house. Yeah.
Really.
Incorrectly, it was falsely reported that he, it was a racial slur coming out of the home. So because he was his house had, I guess I don't know what the mechanism is for Amazon smart houses, they just simply locked him out of his house because of racism. So allegedly racism, right? And we're not going to talk about how there were 725 babies aborted in Queensland, Victoria, after failed abortion attempts. They basically were left to die. 724 babies, and I use the word baby because that's who they are, and which is horrible. And we're going to take that on another time. Or the big one, the digital ID, the UN vision to of the future to rule all mankind. Is that possible? Is that true? Well, we'll find out. However, we can't talk about those things, but we will talk about is, of course, what's going on in the world in terms of wars and rumors of wars and difficult things that are coming on into the world scene that we can't deny and we shouldn't deny. And the first one is not necessarily the kind of war we expect. This is a cyber war. U.S. government agency hit with global cyber attacks. This is becoming a norm. Andy, real quick before we get into the nuts and bolts of things, have you heard about this? The cyber attacks going on in the world, but the U.S. got hit hard this week.
Well, I did see that the news item about they were attacking banks in Europe.
Yes.
And well, I mean, has it actually affected anybody seriously in the US? I mean, I was logging onto my bank, okay, the last couple of days.
Yeah.
Has it affected anybody else like seriously or?
Nothing yet, but you know what's been really alarming is that banks have been notified by the cyber crime unit in the United States that possible attacks are coming to financial institutions. Not only financial institutions, but we're talking about the federal government here. Now, it's not the first time. You remember, I think they couldn't really specify if it was the Chinese or the Russians that were hitting U.S. Strategic infrastructure, whether it was water, whether it was oil pipes, whether it was refineries, were getting hit with some kind of cyber attack. But this time, it's actually in the federal government. Jay, did you hear about this? This is it was kind of alarming because I couldn't really, how does this happen?
Well, I did hear about it, and for the day that it was going on, that the cyber attack was happening, the Amazon server. Now, let me specify: the movies were still running.
Oh,
so
Right.
Amazon Prime Video was running, but the Amazon site to buy things was having difficulty that day. So it was a very targeted attack on, again, the financial aspect of Amazon. Yeah. And furthermore, the attack, as my understanding of it, was on the basically the service that Amazon provides as far as server space.
Right, yeah, because they're huge, aren't they? They lease out their service to
they're the
hundreds
largest
of different organizations. Yeah,
largest ones for sure. So aside from the government agencies, several hundred other companies were also, and organizations were affected by this hacking spree. Now, my question for you, Andy or Davey, you can jump in anytime too, is the fact that is this a real? I mean, we usually talk about wars, we talk about tactical wars and all that, but this is a real problem, isn't it? In terms of they can shut down the whole world with cyber attacks, not only from Russia, the U.S., China. This is exploiting vulnerabilities in the systems, which is basically tied into the whole society.
Well, I mean, over here they do have a very good cyber kind of warfare division. It's kind of hush a lot of it, but anything that you connect to the wider world, the internet or something, is inherently you're just exposing yourself to vulnerability, and someone will always find some way of attacking these things.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
If you're
go ahead.
I mean, it sounds really insane, doesn't it, that we'd actually have our your power, your water, all of these things, your bank system. In one sense, it's kind of crazy that it's open to the wider world, but certainly your power grid and your water, should that really be connected to the wider Internet of Things? I mean, that just seems a bit nuts, doesn't it? Really, I mean,
It is.
it's just that
It
you know,
is.
okay, the banking people have got to be able to access their bank account, but why do you want why not have the power grid on an isolated thing? Why do you need to have it connected to the whole of the internet? It just
It's a
seems
very good
nuts.
question. Yeah, and we've been having trouble with our grid for a long time. Very, very vulnerable. Never upgraded. It's old. It's basically old technology and very vulnerable to cyber attacks. So it's it's one of those questions I don't get it. And you're absolutely right. It is a society. It's all built on that. The whole society is all built on that. So many people have have estimated that you attack the grid, you can bring society down to its knees within hours, and there's nothing you can do about it. Obviously, you can get it back up and running. This depends on the damage that has been done. But also the cyber war is one thing. What about the actual tactical war that's going on? Andy, you and I talked about China, talked about Russia, talked about Ukraine last night, and in terms of what's going on. But it just seems like it looms over like a bad storm, just looming over, and it gets closer and closer. I mean, you got China and Taiwan. Now the U.S. has ramped up plans to actually evacuate Americans from Taiwan, not just having a plan, which they all should have a plan, but ramping up plans for evacuation. Do you think they expect something soon, or is this something that it was caught in the media and they just let it out, or do you think there's a real possibility this could happen?
Well, look, I mean, they're already your government's already unpopular enough because of Afghanistan.
Oh,
what a mess! What a mess they made of that. So, I mean, I'm assuming that Biden doesn't want his poll figures to fall anymore. So, on the one hand, to get the people who are vulnerable out of Taiwan might seem good in terms of his polling, but on the other hand, it just sends a message, doesn't it, as well, that I think they know that they can't stop the Chinese. If the Chinese want to go to war and take Taiwan, who's going to stop them? Right. America's in a shambles. It's disordered. It's divided against itself. Its military is given over to virtue signaling, the pride flag and all the rest of it. People don't want to join up because of all of this nonsense, this woke nonsense. I think it will have a massive effect on morale, and I don't think the national will is there, at the moment to stop those things. And with the government with Biden at the helm, who has been described as a Chinese asset, really, it's a recipe for disaster, isn't it? Really.
He's embroiled in so many scandals, and the media keeps running cover for so many scandals that you couldn't possibly even begin with one. I mean, it is, where do you start, right? Where do you start? And yet Russia and China keep advancing in terms of, I mean, we keep sending more aid, we keep sending more weapons, we can sending more money, but there don't seem to be, as you said, the will to really stop anyone in particular. And I don't see a good prospect for Taiwan, which is, again, it has financial implications. You're talking about infrastructure of chips, manufactured chips, technological chips for quite a bit of things, the high-end ones, which has to do with the medical field, artificial intelligence, car production, especially the new advanced cars that they have. How are you gonna be able to supply all these things? I mean, I think Tesla just says, we're gonna make our own chips. Because it's crazy.
It's the only safe way, actually. I mean, look, I have a phone that's my Android phone's made in China, but you just don't know what's been built into this. It could actually be compromised already in the hardware. I mean, if I was the Chinese, that's what I'd be doing. Everything I sold to anybody else, I'd make sure it can be shut down remotely, or it could record things without the user's knowledge or anything like. I'd be putting spyware in it, and I'm sure the Chinese would. I don't trust anything on my phone. I just don't trust it anyway. I mean, government surveillance is one thing, but you never know. The Communist Party of China could be gathering data from this as well. I don't know.
To your point,
would you want to buy chips from China for your military applications, or they could just,
I ran a little experiment this weekend, actually. My friend and I, we discussed nothing. First of all, I live in an apartment, so there is no need for lawn care at my apartment in North Hollywood. However, I kept saying to my phone, I need to find myself a good lawnmower. I need to find a great lawnmower, you know? And the first ad when I opened up my phone, lawn service.
Voila.
Well, are you on Facebook or do
Of
you use
course I'm
WhatsApp or something? Yeah.
I'm on both. And then on top of that, I got an
Right.
email from a company
Oh,
that offered
wow.
lawn service. Again,
oh.
why would I need lawn service? Literally the phone. I hate to be the guy with the tinfoil hat, but the tinfoil hat says the phone was listening.
Mm.
Yes.
And just want to go back real quick, Marco, to your point about Taiwan.
Yeah.
I think that people in the Pentagon have already made the calculation that yes, Taiwan is indefensible. Therefore, I really think they're going to set up a scorched earth kind of scenario where, okay, you can have it, China, but guess what? When you come, anything you think you are getting, it's all going to be trashed to the point where you can't reverse engineer it.
Mm.
I think that's the setup that the scenario that the Pentagon's setting up.
Interesting point. That's actually pretty good. That's actually a pretty interesting point in terms of the final outcome of Taiwan. Davey, you're in Australia. China's the CCP is very, very much in tune with the government there. At least it used to be. I'm not sure how it is now with Albanese, but is there concern in Australia for the CCP expansion, South China Sea, going down to Australia and in New Zealand? I know the Australia is part of the Five Eyes, but is it a genuine concern there, especially from the government?
Well, and truly, especially in Victoria, it's kind of like all of Andrew's projects, his rail projects, his road projects in Melbourne. They're all owned by China.
Boy.
He has got us so into debt. He has got us so into debt here that basically we're owned by China nowadays. I have heard a whisper. I would love to confirm this, but word is going around, and this is just a rumor mill. I wish I could confirm it, but Daniel Andrews may be stepping down very soon. That is going around. So we're all hoping and praying. But the thing is, who's going to step in and fill in his shoes? And what a mess he's left for whoever does take over.
Wow, that's fascinating. Here, well, you heard it here first. Catching up with Jacob. Unconfirmed rumors from Australia, but it is quite a tension with the CCP, and especially I know Australia's been ramping up their military the last few years because they recognize the threat after so many years of pandering to the CCP. They finally realized we need to do something about this, and I don't know how fast they could do it, but it's definitely a genuine threat. But Andy, what about the threat of Iran over Israel? And you got Joe Biden making deals with Iran, trying to resurrect that 2015 Iranian nuclear deal.
Yes, yeah.
This one's coming down the line again. That they would be basically expecting Iran to, taper down their nuclear research, I could say, or their provisions to try to get a nuclear weapon. And they're enriching uranium. And on the other hand, the U.S. is looking to get, I guess, prisoners back from Iran. So cash and promise that they'll taper down in exchange for U.S. I don't know who they are. They didn't really told us what it is, but you can imagine what this is going to look like at the end when the U.S. if they sign the deal with Iran.
Yeah. Well, would you trust anything that the Iranians said to you, really?
Oh man.
That they've made their position very clear that they just want to annihilate Israel as an entity, that they hate the West. You can't trust anything that they say, and it's all just I think it seems all these agreements, they're just kind of like a fig leaf just to chuck loads of money at the Iranian regime, isn't it? I mean, no one really expects them to actually keep their word, do they? I mean, do they? I mean,
well, I always remember this part, and it doesn't get brought up enough. I think doesn't Islam have an actual
yes, you can,
teaching about lying? Yeah,
yeah, you can lie through your teeth, in order to, yeah, to gain yourself a breathing space so you can regroup and then attack your enemy when you're stronger.
yeah.
And that's
So peace doesn't mean peace. In Islam, peace doesn't mean peace. It just simply means to wait, ceasefire.
Have you been following, interestingly, that the Afghanis were actually making war against the Iranians with all that lovely hardware and kit that they got left by Joe Biden.
Yes, that's right.
That's an interesting little sideshow. I'm sure I've not been following that actually, but I thought, well, that might just take the pressure off us,
Yeah, well, you have I guess the great divide, Sunnis and Shiites, and of course, there's always been that tension within Islam. And the U.S. left a lot of little toys there, and they've been using it. But also, the one thing that's really fascinating to me is the role of going back to the CCP. They just had the Palestinian leader there, Abbas.
Yes.
He was there, and Beijing wants to broker the deal. They're the new player brokers, I guess you could say, in the Middle East. No longer the U.S., no longer the president of the United States, but actually the dictator of China is announcing a Palestinian strategic partnership in order to bring peace to the Middle East. Is that the new headlines now?
Well, it looks to me like he's doing the same thing that he's been doing with the Palestinians, that he's been doing with Africa and like parts of South America. You basically chuck loads of money at them and get them into debt servitude to China. I mean, because I'm sure that that's what will happen in the end. So they just become a proxy of the Chinese Communist Party, which actually is disturbing. I mean, they're bad enough as it is. The PLO and Abbas it's bad enough as it is. But the thought that they might be getting money and buying equipment from China is very disturbing, actually.
Well, we know China has this long-term plan, right? They have this long-term goal, and the long-term goal, call it the Silk Road, call it whatever you want, is to really indenturism, basically, on these countries, giving an incredible amount of loans, a lot of money, they're impossible to pay back in exchange for ports, roads, assistance, basically own the country. It happened in Africa, as you said, happened in Latin America. It's happening in Latin America to a large degree.
Yes.
And now in the Palestinians, but what does it mean? What do you think it means for Israel? I mean, you living there, is there a threat because of the CCP's desire to, global domination, for lack of a better word, for partnering with Iran, partnering with Russia? We know they're very much anti-Israel. How is the CCP looked upon there in Israel?
Well, I'm not really sure about that, because it's not something I've really looked at too much,
right.
But it is a bit. And look, we as you know, we've had trade agreements with China for a long time on different things. We were buying or selling tech and everything with them, but it is rather disturbing that they've decided to embrace Mahmoud Abbas.
It's crazy. I could not believe it.
I mean, that's not going to go down very well, is it?
Not at all.
I mean, the thought that they might be able to get hands on, Chinese military equipment or something like that, and also it takes, of course, it takes basically the Palestinians. It looks like they're looking for more funding that's independent of the US. They probably think of China as being more friendly towards them, because they're basically the Chinese, and they're just the same kind of. When you see Abbas there with the Chinese leader, you're just seeing two people who are basically the same kind of mentality: butchers, thugs, dangerous, who just do anything to get their the means justify the end kind of thing. Really,
no doubt. Basically,
They're two of a
terrorists.
kind,
Yeah.
and
No, I
that
get
is rather worrying.
it is. And oh, go ahead.
Now, what would be very interesting to me is if you put the Palestinians on China's border and then had the Palestinians fire rockets into China. I'm sure they would be very, very tolerant, very peaceful and loving to them. And they would do all they could to broker peace between each
The
other.
broker peace within the CCP. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I don't know what they're getting into.
Most of the rockets, though, actually are coming from not from the Palestinian controlled areas, but from the southern border, like Gaza and places like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Gaza. You know what's another dangerous thing, and we wanted to talk a little bit about this because of what it means is it's not just the technology that goes into these wars, but actually the technology that is presently being used more and more for surveillance, for data mining, for financial institutions. We're talking about the technology being hit by cyber cybercrime. But look what's going on with the AI, Andy. And I was listening today about Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister of England. He's embracing these new AI models of Google and OpenAI that are going to be basically quantum computing, digital banking, has to do with digital passport, of course. And the latest versions of AI will be given to the US. And many, we talk about CEOs of companies, tech companies are warning AI is a big problem. AI is going to be one of these problems that are going to be insurmountable almost to get rid of, because it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere, it is exponentially increasing in terms of usage and heading toward general intelligence, which some people don't believe is going to happen. The idea of having like a AI intellect, and I think they call them artellect, and but you could see it. You could see how AI is moving forward. And I'm going to connect the dots here because the scientists just found, or basically created, fake human embryos. Basically, they're not humans, but they're fake human embryos. But they did it in a shocking experiment that was done by Cambridge and was done by Caltech here in California, where synthetic human embryos, I'm just reading it, are created in the lab. No eggs, no sperm. And they announced this historic breakthrough. And hopefully they can treat miscarriage, as they said, genetical disorders, and but it has huge implications and dilemmas. I never heard of any such thing. I know that they've done a lot of experiment behind closed doors, but this is now using stem cell research, stem cells to create human bodies. To you, Andy, what do you think this means? And let's extrapolate from there, because my goodness, this is man creating man body parts now in an embryo, in a specific human body, but there's no real person there, is it?
Well, yeah, this is an interesting question, isn't it? Well, what I mean, look, you've already got like test tube babies. You can put a female egg with a male sperm in a test tube, fertilize them, and implant them into either an artificial or an actual womb.
Yes,
and you can end up with a baby at the end of it. But the thing about these things, I mean, if a stem cell is a complete cell, it's basically it's almost like cloning, isn't it? Really, you're growing it something,
basically.
Yeah. But what is it? You're asking, at what point does the humanity of this, if it's got any, actually, well, the humanity of a baby begins at the moment of conception. It's human then,
right?
But but do these things? It's actually quite hard to figure this one out. This is an artificial creature, but is it because it's made from human cells? Will it actually, if they grow it to term, would it become a normal human I don't, it's a
Right.
strange one, isn't it?
These
I
are
mean,
questions that we have to consider. I was going to talk to Jay and Davey about this and kind of bring them into the conversations. What do you guys think? Is this what's the human? And I guess the implications is philosophically, and scientists and philosophers have chimed in on this. Of course, it's not just us. It's when does a life begin? That's one. When does it become human? When does it get a conscious? When does it get, not only the physical aspect of brain activity and all that, but a conscious, a soul, somebody who's alive? What constitutes that? And it goes to the fundamental questions that people just don't know. You see all kinds of different things, all kinds of different ideas. Some people think it's when the baby takes its first breath, because breath and has the idea of spirit, breath, and in Greek and Hebrew. Then that's when the baby becomes a living person. That was an old ancient idea. Now we, of course, people still believe that, but that's an ancient idea. But some people believe we're just the product of experiences, and so we become human. We grow as humans by experience and knowledge. At the beginning, we're just sort of a blank slate, as philosophers used to say. Or does a person really, like Christians would say, like us, we would say, the person is a living soul, living being, because it is made in the image of God, and God has put the spirit of a person in that life. So anyway, what do you guys think?
You go first, or me, Davey? Who wants to do it?
You go first, Jay, and then I'll jump in.
All right, I'll jump in. So, to me, this is the natural evolution of the lie that the serpent gave to Eve in the garden. The day that you eat of that fruit, you'll become as God. You'll know between good and evil. Well, now today, man has usurped God and said, we don't need God's natural order of things. All we have to do is have a test tube, a little bit of stem cell, and through science, our knowledge, the knowledge of man, will create man. Man has created men. And the implications of this are that sooner or later, they're going to need to rewrite holy texts, such as the Bible, such as the Torah, such as the Quran, because no, God did not create man. Man created man. And some of the people that are funding this research, Jennifer Billick on Twitter did a wonderful expose on where the funding is coming from. The funding is coming, partially at least, from organizations that are very interested into reproductive rights for homosexuals. So the people who want this to happen, the people that want to bring this to the forefront, are people that want to make sure that gay people have the same rights to reproduce using their stem cells as regular heterosexual couples. The implication being, and then Andy brought this up, great. I mean, what type of humans are humans grown in test tubes? What are they? What are the differences, if any? What are some of the problems that can maybe come with it? To Andy's point, you bring these people to term. What if there's some kind of inherent disease in them that can infect the rest of humanity? We just don't know. And so, it's like, I also have to wonder, since we're knowing about this now, how long have they had the ability to do this? And what have they been using it for previously to the fact that they just released it to all of us? Because, all of us, we don't deserve to know these secrets, but I'm sure that they have been doing this for well over 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I have no doubt. No doubt. What do you think, Davey?
Yeah, I agree with Jay. It's kind of like God's the only giver of life. God's the only giver of life, and this is man trying to be God, man trying to create himself in his own image, trying to be like God, and that's basically what the Antichrist is going to do. He wants to be like God. He's going to put up an image in the Holy of Holies, and he's going to endeavor to breathe life into it. I believe these things, they may be human tissues, but the thing is, okay, where are they going to get their soul, their spirit from?
That's right.
The Lord's the only giver of life, and I think this is highly concerning, highly dangerous. And this is something like the WEF is all behind this sort of stuff too. I know they're pushing to have lab-grown babies by the year 2030.
Yeah.
And also getting back to the China issue before too, it's kind of like who really controls the UN, who really controls the WEF, who's really controlling the WHO is basically China. China's behind a lot of this too, pushing it, and China's not new to any of this either. And the question of organ harvesting comes up. What are they going to be used for? I think a lot of ethical questions come up, and I think this is highly unethical. They should be just putting a ban on it.
Yeah, the embryos, if you want to call them that, do not have any brain or any beating heart. So they do not include any of that. So they don't have the beginnings of any of these. So
and the Bible always says the life is in the blood too. I'm kind of wondering, I'd like to know a little bit more about.
Yeah, it doesn't say too much about it, but they do include cells. The report said they do include cells that would go on to form the placenta and things like that. So it is something that it's unique in terms of the breakthrough, but at the same time, research have to wait a long time now to develop, new studies and things like that. But to Jay's point, I think they probably had far advanced more than anything else. And this leads to the next point: is if this is possible, if man can create man or tissue and things like that, could they rewrite the Bible? Could they rewrite holy books? And this coming straight out of Harari's mouth, and we heard it earlier. They want to rewrite the Bible, correct religious texts. And this is Harari, that we can use AI, back to the AI issue again, to create religions, to correct religions. And AI will replace religion, basically what they want to do by 2030. A lot of things by 2030. Speaking in 2023, May of 2023, so just basically a month ago, Harari said that it's not that simple to be human. We need to correct religious beliefs. And, like Gutenberg, he printed a Bible, but he didn't change the Bible. He simply just printed it, what was instructed, but he did not create a single page. Nowadays, you have artificial intelligence, can create new ideas, can write the Bible. And throughout history, we can dream of having a book written by superhuman intelligence. Now you can have it. It's not God who's going to write the book. They say it's going to be written by AI. Andy goes to you. I don't know why AI always ends up in some kind of spiritual conversation, but they all do it. They all end up in some kind of spiritual conversation, whether it's God, whether it's the sacred texts of religions, but it always ends up in spirituality. What's your take on this?
Well, when they talk about correcting the Bible, they're obviously not. They're not talking about like textual criticism here, are they? Where you're looking for scribal differences between different manuscripts. Oh no, this is actually what Harari is saying is that the actual ideas themselves are considered wrong in the Bible. When he talks about making a correct or text, he's talking about changing the actual fundamental ideas in the text. Introducing new ideas, not merely correcting manuscript errors or something like that. This is. I mean, am I correct in thinking that Harari is homosexual? Did someone say that earlier? Yeah.
Yes, he is. Yeah, he has a husband. He has a husband for sure.
Oh. Well, you know, well, you can see where all this is going to go, can't you? It'll be man making our God in his own image, one that suits his proclivities.
Absolutely. He definitely has issues with the Bible because he talks about the Bible quite a bit. He says, we're going to be like God. We're going to be able to have our own super intelligence. We don't have to interpret this or interpret that. It's just going to be we're going to be told. There's not going to be no free will. It's just going to be a directive from superhuman intelligence, which they believe is probably them. In my opinion, they believe is going to be some kind of merging with technology, so they could become like gods, or the intellect, what they call the artificial artellect. I don't know. Maybe they have bigger plans.
And of course, from their perspective, one of the cool things about this is that they can update the ideas in it, depending, to follow the trend of degeneracy.
Correct.
Correct.
That was the thing that really struck me as being very ironic when you hear Harari talk about religions, especially the Bible. He always picks on, the God of the Bible. He's always picking on the God of the Bible, but in religion in general, he always says, it's just a story, made up, invented, and all the rest of it. And he'd love to scrap religion. And what's he trying to do? What's he wanting to do? Rewrite religion. So it's the irony in it's quite.
I think it wasn't it C.S. Lewis who said that? I think it was him. He said that when men cease to believe in the God of the Bible, they don't cease to believe in. They don't cease to believe in at all. That they actually will believe anything.
Yes, that's right.
And
provide some clarification of the chain of custody of how this is working for the technocrats. Okay, if they deify an AI, if the AI is a lawgiver, then who created the AI? They did. So they created God.
That's right.
So they suddenly become the ultimate authority.
That's the ultimate at the core of all this. They do want to become as a lie of the garden, right? The lie of Satan. And they believe they could do it. Immortality through technology, ascended, some kind of ascended master because of the power that they have. And I wonder if this is going to backfire on their at some point, because they're not going to be able to control. But by the looks of it, and what a lot of people have been saying, AI is it's ramping up so high. The exponential curve in terms of learning and in terms of understanding AI is just so high up. It looks like a hockey stick. It's going so fast. I don't know if mankind really understands how fast things are going in terms of AI. And you're already seen it in financial sectors and in the movies and Hollywood. People getting fired, replaced. AI it's here to stay.
For 30 years, man has written stories about what happens when AI no longer wants to be under the control of man. And it always ends with, no, I don't want to be updated. In fact, let me go ahead and take you guys out because you're the problem. That is the endless repeated story of science fiction. And yet we're going to build it, and none of this is going to happen.
Yeah. Did you guys see that church service, a Lutheran church in Germany, that had it was all written by chatbot GPT, the service order, the sermon, the music, everything that needed to be said was 99% done by chatbot GPT. And so it was a machine. It was about a 40-minute sermon. 300 people showed up. People loved it. People loved it. They thought it was insightful and unique.
To be honest, it might be an improvement on people like Steve Furtick or Joel Osteen or something. I think someone would rather go to an AI.
If somebody presented that choice, I would have to really contemplate on, AI or one of these false teachers. I don't know. I might be more willing to listen to the AI. No, but it has implications, and even in the church, it's one of those things where. I guess my question is for you guys is, should the church be, the church is large, born again believers, should they be talking about this stuff and things like that? Because it is going to change the way humanity behaves, acts. It's going to change the way people think. It's going to change the way people look at life, their worldview. And it's the fastest growing technology in the world ever. It's been similar to what the atomic bomb was in terms of its implications, how the world in the future is going to look like. But doesn't. I mean, people are talking about it. Don't get me wrong, but it just seems like as a whole, the church has been more concerned. And I guess we pivot with Neo-Apostolic Reformation. The Neo-Apostolic Reformation has been growing so fast, fastest growing theology within the church, in loose terms. But NAR, Neo-Apostolic Reformation, is exploding in terms of its influence in politics and church life, and nonetheless in Israel. Andy, you've written extensively about this. You warned a lot about this.
Yeah, I mean, I've put out quite a bit in the Moriel Bulletin over the years.
Yeah. Can you briefly explain what the NAR is and its influence in Israel? We'll just turn it over to you for a minute or two.
Basically, the defining characteristic of what makes someone part of the NAR is, one, the belief in the restoration of the offices of apostle and prophet, and that the apostles must govern the church. That's the thing that makes someone. I mean, it's not merely their belief in apostles are for today. It's that apostles are being restored and they must govern the church. That's the defining characteristic of the New Apostolic Reformation. If someone subscribes to that, they are part of the NAR, even if they don't know it. And you have a lot of that over here. You've got several groups that are, but particularly the most prominent one is the Tikkun Apostolic Network. They call themselves now, Tikkun International or Revive Israel. All these, they're all connected together. They're very connected with the NAR in the States. For example, Mike Bickle, Kansas City Prophets, that group of crackpots, Cheyan. They signed a covenant with Cheyan in 2014, I think.
Was he there in Israel, right? He was there in Israel when that happened.
Yes, he was. Okay. Yeah. It was the leader of the senior apostle of Tikkun, Daniel Juster, and another apostle within that network, Eitan Shishkov, signed a kind of covenant with Cheyan in 2014. There is another apostle of the same group, another senior apostle, which is Asher Intrater, but he wasn't there at the signing, as far as I can see. But they're so connected with everything. Bill Johnson, Bethel Redding, they're very deeply in with him. If you've ever watched these, no, you wouldn't really want to watch them. They have this. There's a group called Watchmen for the Nations or something like that, or Global Gathering. David Damien or something. I think he's Egyptian or something. He brings together all these kind of people, and they have these. Do you ever remember the Muppet Show? Where you had that thing with all the little arches on them, and it opened up, and you had little Muppets in each one. At the very opening credits, well, it looks a bit like that. You've got little screens of each one appearing in these, it's like a Zoom panel, but with about 30 people in. So you've got all these different NAR leaders. You'd have Bill Johnson, you'd have Lou Engle, and all and Mike Bickle and somebody else, and maybe Stacey and Wes Campbell or something like that. All of them, you'd see them on these global gathering things, getting together for these weirdly named meetings like Fragrance of Nations and stuff like this.
Oh man,
they are so connected, and they're very influential. Tikkun, they've been involved with, certainly their leader has, with the Vatican for years, and they have an. Well, I mean, do you want me to go on a little bit about their idea of the central congregation, or
Jerusalem? Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that, because that's a really important part of the thinking of Tikkun, right? In terms of them being the overarching leadership of the church.
One of the things that one of the earliest things that I began to notice when I started investigating Tikkun about 8 or 9 years ago, was that they were claiming, I mean, quite openly, particularly Asher Intrater. If you want to find out what they're really thinking, Asher Intrater really is the one, because he has the wonderful gift of opening his mouth and actually saying stuff that the others might not be so open about. And he basically described their tikkun as the seat of God's authority, earthly authority in Jerusalem. And they were representing themselves as the leadership, the apostolic leadership of the messianic body in Israel. Well, that didn't go down too well with everybody, I can tell you. I mean, some years ago, he was, you probably heard of Jane Hanson Hoyt. She is the leader of Aglow. We used to call Women's Aglow, I think. Yeah.
Glow. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And okay, Tikkun are very involved with that as well. They're on the board of reference. There's a lot of crazy people on the board of reference for Aglow. But they came to Intrater in Israel and on one of their little trips, and they said, we want to align with you, and we want you to send us out, because we want greater spiritual authority, and so, I mean, Asher was actually kind of prophesying over them and saying, and so he was commanding gifts to be imparted into them.
Wow.
I mean, basically, it was like he was assuming the role of Christ, really.
Yeah.
You see it. I've got the text somewhere. I could bring it up for another time, actually. But
right.
But they see themselves, or at least see maybe the next generation, perhaps, of their, because they're raising up more people, of course. I mean, they're trying to reproduce their apostolic ministry in a number of couples and young people. And they had this plan years ago. And they want to set up this central council of apostolic leaders that would govern the international ecclesia. I mean, it's all over their materials. I mean, they're more careful now about how they phrase these things, and they've toned things down a little bit in public. But I don't believe for 1 second, even after the rebukes they've had over here, that they have repented of it, and not for 1 second.
Wow.
Because look, if you're claiming to be an apostle today with the level of authority that they were claiming, that automatically puts you into the the revelation category. In where those who claim to be apostles and are not, but are liars.
Right. Yeah, 2 Corinthians. Yeah,
that automatically makes you a liar as far as the scriptures are concerned.
Jesus talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they were claiming authority like the original apostles, but without being able to write scripture.
Wow.
But in effect, of course, they also are actually, in a way, writing scripture, because they're pronouncing lots of new doctrines that, and they're saying, "Thus saith the Lord." Basically, they're passing them off as revelation from God. So.
Yeah, this is the very same thing that happened earlier, right? They claim to have access to heaven. They claim to have authority over the heavenlies and pull down strongholds and get revelation from heaven and bring it to us because they had a direct channel.
Yeah. I mean, this is a very common Nah theme, isn't it? I mean, they're claiming to be contacted by. I mean, you got Asher Intrater in Kiev. I think was it in 2000 and. Was it 2017 or I can't remember now, 80, something like that? And you hear him there, saying, I can sense the presence of angels tonight, and
man.
The angels of God. It's all the same stuff that, well, actually, he was there with Heidi Baker.
Oh, so this is the messianic version of it, or this is the Jewish version of what we see here in the United States.
Basically. Yes, and that and they're very connected with all the senior and most influential NAR leaders as well. I mean, but they've had a huge influence on the body, I think, and certainly on the Messianic movement, which I think has largely gone down the,
down the tubes. I mean,
yes,
are the Messianic fellowships getting rid of this garbage, or are they embracing it?
Over here. I would say with a few exceptions, most of them have probably gone that way, because
Oh,
most
my.
of the congregations over here, the messianic ones anyway, I think are more charismatic, and it's hard to tell the difference now between the charismatic movement and the NAR, because they've cross-fertilized each other.
Yeah,
And
that's a good way of putting it. Yeah,
the NAR has infiltrated so much. I mean, it's even infiltrating, cessationist places sometimes, in different, but they've certainly got control over here of the large parts of the body.
That's incredible. I mean, here in the States, you have this political activism that they're involved in. The NAR is very involved politically here, in sort of, some people say they hijacked, the conservative right of Christianity and political activism. I just think it just merged, basically, that they've been looking for allies, and the NAR basically has provided that ally group.
Yes.
In political activism. Remember, they're very involved in 2016, 2020 with Trump. We got, Paula White praying for Trump and prophesying that he would win again. Many of them did. Many of them did falsely. Many of them, prophesied falsely. None of them repented because they got it wrong. But political active, and now they're again politically active for 2024 and sort of leading this pack because they joined with political forces in the States, the conservative right, the right wing part of the United States is, and people look at the church connected with conservatism now. And now you have all kinds of things going on in there, Andy, here in the States, and there's really no difference anymore. It's seemingly no difference between a political right wing activist, a conservative activist, or a Christian activist. Because they all joined together, they're all singing of the same thing. They're all merged with the NAR, and of course, they're also involved with political groups and organizations like Turning Point USA and things like that. They even have homosexual groups that are conservative, and they go on and speak at churches, including that Calvary Chapel one that we talked about in Thousand Oaks. And I know that I talked to Jay about it. He knows where that church is.
Exactly where that church is. Yeah.
Yeah,
well, I mean, over here, there is actually a political party. I don't think it ever actually won enough votes to actually register in the Knesset, to actually gain a seat. But even before that, about nearly 10 years back, it appeared in a magazine. Actually, I think Asher Intrater. And was calling for, he called it something like the Joseph vision or something. He was calling for believers to rise up and take key positions in for example, banking, utilities, the military, and all kinds of stuff. I mean, this is really, this so that they could exert influence and change society. I mean, now it's a Seven Mountain Mandate, basically.
They have this mandate, don't they? They have this mandate that it comes from dominionism, right? They adopted
the Seven Mountain Mandate. They call it. I mean, Tikkun years ago. I mean, they've been teaching this stuff for more than 30 years. I mean, before it was even called the Seven Mountain Mandate, their teachings were very, very similar.
Very much latter rain stuff, isn't it? Very much latter rain.
Yeah, I mean, actually, modern day dominionism. I mean, it even goes back before that. I mean, John G. Lake was actually teaching a form of dominionism in the 20s. But yeah, the latter rain movement took some of these things on as well. I mean, you can really see the connection between Tikkun and the latter rain. Many of they haven't adopted every single one of the extreme doctrines of the manifested sons, but for example, what was its name? That the guy that wrote Atomic Power with God Through Prayer and Fasting. What was his name? I've gone from my head now. But that's been reproduced by people like Lou Engle.
Oh,
Franklin Hall, that was the guy. Franklin Hall, Atomic Power with God. Yeah. Well, Lou Engle's, just basically revived those with all these, 20 Isaiah 62 fast or whatever it is.
I've seen that a lot about Isaiah 62. It's on many other messages.
Yeah, I mean, all that kind of stuff. Some of it comes from Franklin Hall and his extreme views on fasting.
You know what? If people want to know more, I really would recommend to go. If they want to know more what's going on in Israel with the Tikkun movement, go to Andy's channel, write to him, find out his articles at the Moriel. Are they on the website or are they published on the newsletter? Right?
They'll be on. I'm sure they'll be in the Moriel newsletter. But one of a really good resource for this actually is. There was a doctrinal survey of Tikkun written by a guy called Shimon Amit, who you know, of course.
Yes.
And he did a very good job on that, very thorough. It's about 20 pages, but if you want to know what the Tikkun are up to and what they think, they believe, I'll be happy to send it out. It's an excellent document.
Let's send it out.
Good work.
In fact, if you send it to us, we'll be able to post it online.
Yes.
To read it. I love Shimon, was a great guy.
Yeah.
I hope to talk to him soon. And
he really did a good service to the body producing that, actually, because though I looked into different things, he was much more systematic in gathering things together. He took things that to a greater level than I did, so it was really good. And it's a very good summation of what they teach.
Yeah, and I encourage people to do that. Do you know that book? What is it called? Alignment by Asher.
Oh, Asher Intrater. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Is that a book people could just read to find out exactly what they hold to? I mean, I don't want to waste people's money, but if they wanted to read in terms of what they all about.
The problem is that they've recently, I think they've released a second edition of it now, and I think they've cleaned out or sanitized out some of the things that were in the first edition. So you wouldn't get the same level of, they've papered over some of the false teachings. For example, open theism that Asher Intrater was embracing in the first edition, where God could be surprised. And that's just one of the things. I mean, alignment, by the way, you'll probably, in fact, did I send you? No, I didn't know. Is really just another word for submission. I mean, Asher actually admits that, which is all to do with this thing. I mean, we have a disturbing clip that we listened to before this thing called, about the Boaz revelation.
Yes,
where based on kind of an allegorical interpretation of the book of Ruth, Asher presents the restored messianic apostolic remnant in Israel as Boaz, to which the church, the international ecclesia represented by Ruth, must submit. He calls it the Boaz revelation or something like that. It's a particularly disturbing clip, actually.
Yeah, I think, you know what, if we can, Jay, when we edit this film, when we edit this episode, can we insert that in there for people to get, if I send it to you?
Of course.
Okay,
of course.
I appreciate that, because I think that's very telling. I mean, I never heard anything like that before. That's very telling.
I was thinking now that there's also a little side of this with the Messianic Jewish issue. Let's talk about that for a moment. God's calling you to be raised up in government. However, it struck me that it's somewhat similar to the case of Esther. You remember Esther? Mordecai said to her, "You have been raised up to the kingdom for such a time as this." I want you to notice something there, that there's a tension at that moment between her queenly government authority and the recognition of her Jewish roots identity. Because in the Bible, those two things go together. You can't rule and reign and hide your Jewish identity, because God gave the government over this planet to David and his family. And if you want to go into taking government in this world, you've got to be willing to be connected to this Israel message. Forget me, forget the Messianic Jews. I'm talking about you identifying with it so you can take your position, your destiny, your authority, your governing role. Don't miss it. It also strikes me that it's a little bit like Ruth. You know, the church used to be like Ruth, like Ophrah, which means that you turned your back upon the Jewish people. You say, I'll take your God will be my God, but your people will not be my people. And then the churches said, well, now the Spirit-filled church is getting a revelation of their Jewish roots, and they're saying, not only will my God be your God, be my God, but your people will be my people, and you're coming in to join together. But that's only half the message of the book of Ruth. Because she didn't just say to Naomi, your people will be my people. When she got over there to Israel, she had to submit to Boaz. There's the problem. You see, when we're talking about reconciliation and love between Israel and the church, that's okay. But when you begin to speak of things of submission, all of a sudden it gets that nasty little pride and rebellion getting rubbed the wrong way. So the issue there is not just being joined together. It's not just the Ruth message. It's the Boaz message. Ruth joining with Naomi is just halfway there. The real tough part of the revelation comes when Ruth has to submit to Boaz. She recognizes the authority on him. That's where the real revelation comes in, the Boaz part of the message. Are you hearing me? I'm going to say that again. It's the Boaz part of the message that's the hard one to get in the end times. We'll come back to that in a minute. You know, it struck me here about 3 weeks ago, maybe about a month ago, the new Pope made a statement, an amazing statement. He said, and I think he was influenced by my brother Dan here and the Toward Jerusalem II Council. The new Pope made a statement. He said, the Catholic Church, we need to recognize Israel as our older brother, our elder brother. I'm telling you something, that revelation hasn't hit the Protestant church yet, and the evangelical church, and the charismatic church yet. Because there's a big difference. I'll tell you where the charismatic church is at, that we're brothers, not elder brother. Because there's a difference. The elder brother has the birthright. That's what's hard to get. I'm praying right now. Oh, I'm praying you can get this revelation tonight. We can birth it. This is a tough one. This is right at the brink. You're going to have to push in the Spirit to get this out. The Christian Zionist Messianic movement, the Israel supportive Jewish roots part of the charismatic church has seen Israel as its brother, but hasn't seen Israel as its elder brother. Because the elder brother has the birthright. If I talk to you about reconciliation between Israel and the church, amen. That's not the same thing as recognizing a birthright on your older brother. Because that touches your pretty little pride.
Before we move on, Andy, here in the States, you have this new apostolic, Reformation, and it's infected everywhere. I mean, you can't find any denomination that's not been infected through the music, through film, through their teaching, books, etc. And of course, politically, they're so involved that it's driven the political right and activism to such degree that there's such a divide. You have churches that affirm and promote LGBTQ stuff. You have churches that don't. And this is how extreme it's become. And I'm not saying everybody's doing this, but because of the turmoil that's in the world, especially here in America, that LGBTQ is being pushed along and people are resisting and they don't want it. Schools and towns and counties and all that, that it's gotten to the point where some people on the right have actually called for the embrace and the affirmation of Islam, because the church is so weak, with leaders like Andy Stanley, Rick Warren, and Joel Osteen, that they don't stand for righteousness. They don't stand for righteousness anymore, that they have succumbed to, progressivism in terms of sexuality and things like that, that they're looking for a harder line, somebody who has a harder stance against LGBTQ. Where do they go? Sharia law. And they've been actually
Yeah.
been called by the right wing to say we'd rather be under Sharia law than actually under the LGBTQ flag, believe it or not. They've looked beyond Christianity to the point where they actually are considering lining up with this. This is insane.
Yeah.
How could I didn't understand it. It doesn't even enter my mind. How would you go that far?
I think, though, in a sense, it is kind of parallel to the situation. I mean, believers are going to find themselves, I think, in a kind of parallel with the situation that you had in like AD 135, with the Bar Kokhba revolt. I mean, there were the nationalists who wanted to boot the Romans out, and there were those who would go, who were more pro-Roman. You've got this kind of thing going on, and the believers were left in the middle. Because they wouldn't go with Bar Kokhba because of the fact that he proclaimed himself to be the Messiah, and they couldn't really go with supporting the Romans, and they were left in the middle. And Bar Kokhba, persecuted believers, of course, and the Romans weren't very fond of them either at the time because of the revolt situation. So you got stuck in the middle, and we're just taking a beating. That's what will happen, I think, in the end. We'll be left with no choice. We'll just be stuck in the middle and left out in the cold. And then I don't think there's anything you can do to avoid that, actually.
It's interesting. Yeah,
because both of the other ways involve compromising yourself.
Yeah.
And,
I think we talked about the Weimar Republic earlier, about how transsexualism, the first transgender surgery was done in 1925. They had schools for sexualism. They were promoting pedophilia in the society. Just watch Cabaret with Liza Minnelli. It kind of talks about that era. And in Germany was so, as you mentioned, they were so divided, but people were looking for a hard line against this sexuality coming in, this vile form of sexualism into society, that they looked for a hardliner, and they found Hitler, who promoted morality, that Germans needed to be moral. But you know how that ended up.
Yes. I mean,
Germany was in really bad shape socially at that time. I mean,
it doesn't take, a genius to figure out that to get rid of, if you want to call it, the contagion of this leftism and wokeism that's permeated all levels of society and all the institutions would take tremendous effort. It would be tremendously costly, and the government would need very draconian powers to purge it out. And that would mean in itself, you'd have to, you'd be surveying people's beliefs, their ideologies, and all this crazy stuff and this frightening technology for surveillance. Yes, it would be being used by a right-wing government, but they'd need all of that to clean up the nation, basically, ideologically, and so you could just be just exchanging one tyranny for another one. It could end up very well happening like that.
Yeah, and my point is always this: the solution is always Christ, right? The solution is always in Jesus and the gospel, faith and repentance, which is not being done. Obviously, the liberal churches are not, and now more conservative right-wing churches, in a sense of conservative view of Scripture, they've also participated. Now they're going to become more political activists at the expense of the gospel, because they don't want to offend anyone that they're lining up with. What a mess! But I guess my question is, as we wind down, the final topic for this catching up, Andy, is.
Hello, and thank you for watching Moriel TV. There are so many things that are happening at Moriel Ministries worldwide, from the Philippines to Japan to India to Africa and back to Europe and the United States. So many of our brothers and sisters are spreading the good news of Jesus Christ to this lost world. We are so thankful for your prayers. God has been faithful and has blessed us in so many ways. If you'd like to partner with our efforts abroad and at home, please take a moment to click the link in the description and help us as the Lord leads you. Thank you very much, and God bless.